We moved into a new house a few months ago. As we were in the process of purchasing the house, the renter who was living in it died unexpectedly of natural causes in his mid-40s. He died right in the middle of the living room. Shortly after, we move into the house, and almost immediately our 2-year-old daughter starts talking about the ghost that lives in our house. Now let's be real here, she is 2, and 2-year-olds are very impressionable. Halloween had recently passed, and she had this Halloween-themed picture book that she loved to read, so it's entirely possible that all this talk of ghosts was just coming from looking through that book on a regular basis. Still, she was always telling me that the ghost was in her playhouse in the basement, or that the ghost was on the stairs, or that the ghost was standing in the corner. She never seemed to be afraid of the ghost, and considered him to be her friend, so I wasn't all that concerned even if there really was a ghost haunting our house. I would often tell the ghost that he was welcome to stay if he wanted to, but he was also welcome to go if that would make him happier. I was about 30-70 on the ghost being real and she could see and talk to him versus the ghost being just her imagination fueled by her Halloween book. Until one day, when we were going out to the car to go to daycare in the morning. It was still dark out, and rainy. My daughter told me that the ghost was on the back deck, and then she told me that today was the ghost's birthday and she wanted to sing him happy birthday. Once again, I mostly disregarded what she was saying, as she is birthday obsessed and has in the past made us sing happy birthday to Mickey Mouse, a bowl of fruit snacks, and the bathroom. So we sang and wished the ghost a happy birthday and went on with our lives. Later that day, out of pure curiosity, I looked up the obituary of the man who had died in our house. It was his birthday. I was out in the middle of nowhere at a musical conference my wife was presenting, held at an old church retreat camp. One of her presentations ran way over, so the lodge's cafeteria was closed. With no car, no phone, this area was so remote there was no coverage for mobile, and no vending machines. The only resort was to walk into the nearest town and get food. I grabbed a coat and flashlight and had no issue on the trip down and snagged a pizza from a spot along the highway around midnight. On the way back it was a different story. I got a severe feeling of discomfort. I could feel eyes on me. This was out in the middle of the woods, so my first instinct is there is an animal following me. Knowing most predators like to hit from either above or behind, I turned on my phone light and kept it pointed behind me and swept my flashlight up and down as I walk. The whole walk back I heard rustlings, first along one side, then following behind. I kept a steady pace and acted cool, even though I was terrified. Shortly before I was back on site, the feeling left, no more sounds. My wife and I enjoyed pizza and slept in. 2 days later we got a shock from the news. A homeless woman was found less than 1,500 yards from our site that had been mauled and partially consumed in what appeared to be a cougar attack. Estimates of the time of death were the same night I went out for pizza. I live only a few streets away from my workplace. This guy came to my floor one day for a team meeting. Ever since then, he made a point to pass my desk when walking to the kitchen, which doesn't make sense logistically, as the elevator basically opens right onto the kitchen. Keep in mind, this guy is a complete stranger. Nobody had ever seen him on our floor, so my work friends knew he purposefully came to our floor just to see me. He would make excuses to be near me whenever I was in the kitchen, example, to get a glass of water while I was washing my dishes. He was always alone, never spoke to anyone, and only watched me. This happened for about 3 months. One day, he happened to be downstairs when I finished work. He then knew exactly what time I finished and waited downstairs for me every day. He just sat there watching, waited for us to leave, then went back up. One day, I walked out with a friend. We saw him sitting downstairs, so we quickly walked out of the building and parted ways, assuming he would go back up now that we'd left. Boy, was I wrong. my friend walked off in the opposite direction, leaving me alone. I had crossed the road and was just about to turn to the direction of my apartment, when some higher power compelled me to turn around. The feeling that rushed over me just then, I had never felt it before. It was like a mix of all the most negative emotions in the world all swirling into one massive supercloud of fear. When people talk about the flight or fight response, this was literally the epitome of that. To this day, I still cannot understand what made me turn around when I generally never do that. I was smart enough to go in a completely different direction so he wouldn't know where I live. He walked a short distance behind me, crossed the road, and checked to see where I was walking home to. Another male colleague happened to finish work at the same time this went down, so he followed him and waited to see what he was doing. He confirmed that he absolutely followed to see which direction I was going and then went back into the building once I had walked too far ahead. He would have only needed to follow me a short distance to see where I lived. This happened a few more times before I finally reported him and got him banned from entering all buildings associated with my company. Turns out he didn't even actually work for my company and shouldn't have even been in my building in the first place. I was driving a shortcut from 29 Palms, California to Albuquerque, New Mexico. 29 Palms is located in the desolate high desert east of LA. The shortcut was completely a two-lane road through total nothingness, except for passing through Amboy, California. It was also, at the time, a hotspot for satanic group activity. So, I was driving by myself in the afternoon. I stopped in Amboy and snapped a picture of the city sign, just to prove I was there to friends who dared me to take that route to I-40. I got back in my car and proceeded to drive up into the mountain range between Amboy and I-40. Once I reached the top, I am driving north through a canyon with high grass on both sides of the road. Up ahead, I see some stuff in the middle of the road. As I approach, I slow down to see a red Pontiac Fiero stop sideways across both lanes, a suitcase open with clothes scattered everywhere and two bodies laying face down in the road, a man and a woman. I stop 100 feet or so away and the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. Being a Marine, I reach under the seat and pull out a 9mm pistol and chamber a round. Something seemed very wrong, it looked too perfect as if it were staged. Was I being paranoid? Something was just wrong. Getting out of the car seemed unthinkable, it was the horror movie move. As I scanned the road I saw a line I could drive. Past the guy in the road on his left, swerved to the right side of the woman, behind the Fiero, and I'd be on the other side. I dropped it into first gear, punched it and drove the line I planned. I passed the back of the Fiero without hitting it or either of the bodies in the road. I continued forward a couple 100 feet and slowed down so I could breathe and let my heart slow down. As I looked up into the rearview mirror I saw that the two bodies had gotten up to their knees and 20 or so people emerged from the tall grass on either side of the road by the car and bodies. At that moment my right foot smashed the gas pedal to the floor and did not let up until I had to slow down for the I-40 East on-ramp. I will never know what would have happened to me had I gotten out of the car to check on the bodies or stopped my car closer to them. I lived in an old farmhouse that was over 150 years old in the 1990s and at some point had been used as a headquarters for Union troops in Northern Virginia. The house had a stone cellar, divided into 2 rooms, and it always made me uncomfortable going down there to get anything from my parents. One day I was asked to find some menial object that was in the cellar, and I knew it would be in the room with the boiler in it, the room that also had a dysfunctional light. So I made my way into the basement and lo and behold the damn light wouldn't turn on, but the object I needed was within the frame of light reaching into the blackness of the room through the doorway. So I walked a few steps into the room, grabbed the object and randomly glanced around. In the corner of the room was a dark shadow about 6 feet in height, and humanoid in shape. No worries though, my dad kept his 6-foot-tall John Wayne cutout in the basement, so that had to be it. I calmly turned to my left and nearly jumped out of my damn skin as I came face to face with John Wayne just inside the doorway and leaning against the wall. About a year ago, I was lying in bed, drifting off to sleep with my wife asleep, cuddled up to me on my left side like she always does. I reached that point where I could feel my conscious mind begin to fade, that point where unless you jar yourself out of it, you won't remember it, but if you do, then you'll remember it. All at once I feel a slight chill on my right side, and I hear some sort of weird slow whispering that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It sounded like someone whispering something backwards, slowly. I was immediately awake and my eyes darted around the very poorly lit room, but I saw and felt nothing. I shrugged it off and went back to sleep. The next morning I'm getting my coffee and my wife mentions a very strange dream that she had last night, right after she fell asleep. I asked what she dreamed, and she told me, "I dreamed I was lying in bed next to you, in our apartment just like normal, except I was awake." I felt a strange presence, so I looked up, and, standing at the foot of the bed was my friend Adam. He looked at both of us, then crawled up onto the bed and started whispering in your right ear. I thought it was a really weird dream. Her friend Adam, not real name, killed himself about 6 months prior to this.